Hello and welcome to History Bubble Austria Part 4. Last episode we saw Austria reforming and liberalizing, mainly under the rule of Joseph II, and we left off when Francis II became ruler by 1792. Francis did not want to continue the reforms of his predecessors, being quite conservative, but the bureaucracy still in place were able to push through some liberal reforms. Meanwhile, Francis was cracking down on possible revolutionaries, cranking up executions. Soon, in the aftermath of the French Revolution, France declared war on Austria, who thought the war would be a cakewalk, with them wanting once again to swap Belgium for Bavaria. But a cakewalk was far from the case, with France crushing the Allied army of the First Coalition and occupying Belgium, which made Austria focus all their strength on the French threat, making them unable to participate in the Second Partition of Poland. The Allied comeback against France went well at first, but the French large citizen armies negated most victories, and the First Coalition was soon on the retreat, once again losing the Netherlands. The Third Partition of Poland also occurred nearly at the same time, with Austria participating. There soon was a short peace with France, which gave them unprecedented gains in the war, and the Second Coalition starting only a year after. In the middle of the war of the Third Coalition, Napoleon declared himself emperor, with Francis soon followed suit, mostly as a gesture, with only slight centralization occurring, and a new flag and shielding resembling that of the Holy Roman Empire. When Napoleon managed to conquer Vienna, he was greeted with applause rather than animosity, and the war soon ended with Austrian defeat, with them losing Vorarlberg to Bavaria, but gained Salzburg from a junior Habsburg branch. Austria also tried to follow the French example of a citizen militia, but it only worked in the German-speaking areas. This effort made Austria have an army of 700,000 within their lands and 300,000 which they could move outside the empire. When they did declare war on France, they had not managed to establish a fourth coalition, so stood on their own against France and the German allies. The war started well, with a Tyrolean revolt winning 4 victories in a short time, but they got little support from Austria and were eventually defeated. The same was true for Austria, with them inflicting the first major defeat on Napoleon, but he had already conquered their capital, and soon the war was lost and Austria basically became a French puppet. Soon, Napoleon's Austrian wife gave birth to a son, cementing their alliance. While Austria started out on the French side, they soon joined the coalition, which eventually defeated France. After the war's conclusion, Austria had relatively low gains compared to the Allies, with them losing Belgium, regaining old lands in Croatia, Italy and Tyrol, some new gains in Italy. Other than that, they also lost the HRE and much of the formal legitimacy. Metternich, the Austrian foreign minister, who had been one of, if not the most influential Austrian in the late Napoleonic period, was a big proponent of keeping the balance of power after the war and not crushing France completely. He believed that a good balance of power would provide peace in Europe, but this was for most people disproven when the Greek War of Independence that caused war between the major powers occurred. Metternich also tried to destroy any and all possible rebellions in keeping the old monarchist systems. All of these things made Austria seem to be one of the biggest threats to progress, with only Russia modernizing at the same level as them. Reform has also been mostly stopped in some areas, and many felt betrayed, but others, such as the bureaucracy and education, was kept Josephist, even though it became way less liberal. Soon Francis died and his son Ferdinand took over, even if Metternich tried to take more power for himself. There were many famous Austrian writers at this time, but many were suppressed by the censorship regime. Industrial revolution was also starting within Austria, but mostly in the core German or Bohemian lands. By March of 1848, a group of students were protesting in Vienna, marching on the parliament and being fired upon by soldiers. They killed 5 of the protesters, starting a mass riot. This was part of the revolutions of 1848, which started with France and spread throughout Europe on the principles of liberalism and nationalism, and started to especially fester in Hungary. From the start of the Austrian part of this revolution, it was unclear whether the German part of it was to be included in a German or Austrian nation. The non-German part of the Habsburg realm were not too keen on being part of the German nation, which in the Czech lands made them isolated. The rebellion there was soon crushed. The upheaval in Vienna also made the royals flee to Innsbruck, and emancipation of the peasantry was soon enacted by the Austrian parliament. The initial revolution in Hungary was soon also put down, but only after mutiny. A new constitution was also being created, and to try to please the revolutionaries, Ferdinand abdicated in favor for his son, Francis Joseph, but he was not quite the king they wanted either, and rejected the new possible constitution. The new emperor's main goal was to preserve their unity. They also gained the help of the Russian to crush the remnants of the Hungarian rebellion. Francis Joseph soon became even more absolute, rejecting the concept of the constitution and clamping down on minor noble powers. His absolutism almost ended feudalism and resulted in the nobility and guilds losing most of the power, destroying most of the old power system, except for the clergy, ironically giving the rebellion most of the demands in the completely wrong way. Metternich death also obscured the foreign policies of the realm. Austria remained neutral in the Crimean War, which alienated them from the former ally in Russia, but soon after was war anyway, as Austria declared war on Piedmont when they made plans with France to conquer the Austrian-Italian lands. The war was narrowly lost by the Austrians, who were humiliated, also lost most of their Italian land, and had a regime change in almost all but the royals, and the end of absolutism. There were also talks of German unification, which went nowhere, since Austria and Prussia could not agree who was to lead, and Francis Joseph also not wanting to lose any of his current power. The conflict between the powers grew, and soon resulted in all-out war, with Austria losing to a combined effort from Prussia and Italy, even with a larger army, mostly because of the failure to modernize. The loss spelled the creation of the North and South German Confederation, both without input from Austria, and with Prussia at the helm, especially in the north. Austria had now lost most of their reputation as a major power, and would spend the last of the days as a dying empire, mostly as a subordinate to Germany. But more of that next time on History Bubble. Hope to see you then.